Welcome, everyone. I'm Casey the Space Shaman, and this is the YouTube channel dedicated to spreading the magic of spirituality and healing to the community of the world. And I'm here joined by my brother Zane once again. How you doing, Zane?
I'm doing pretty good. Very
Good.
happy.
Awesome. So I want to open up talking about addiction today. So this isn't something I've shared a whole lot about on the channel, but I've struggled with some form of substance abuse since early adulthood, or even before then, really. Yeah, since I was probably like a teenager. And I just recently, about 5 or 6 days, like 5 days ago, came off of a 60 gram per day kratom habit. For people who aren't familiar with what kratom is, it's a leaf of a tree related to the coffee plant, but it acts on your opioid receptors in your brain. So the withdrawals can be very similar to opiate withdrawals. And so it's been really wild to go through that. And the thing I've noticed that's different this time is that I truly feel ready to be sober, ready to be clean. And Eris is here, so say Paqo, say Eris.
Hey.
I feel ready to just accept reality and experience life. Whereas before, it was anytime I would come off of a substance, it was just okay. Let me switch to the next one. Let me replace it. So before, if it was actual opiates, it would be, well, now I'm gonna use like a phenibut, or like some kind of gabergic drug, or then I got off that and okay, now let me take kratom, or so then it was alcohol, and I just would switch from one to the next. And I noticed the last time that I came off of something, it was really as soon as I came off of it, I was immediately like craving and like red and wanting to take something else to suppress, and especially during the withdrawals. So this time it's been really uncomfortable the past 5 or 6 days. There's been ways where I felt so sick that it felt like I was going to pass out when I was driving home. That once that was really intense. Have had waves of like depression, and then waves of restlessness and anxiety, and really high emotions and really low emotions, and it's been really a roller coaster. But this whole time, no matter how uncomfortable it's gotten, I haven't felt the desire to take anything. It feels good to even feel the discomfort. I don't want to be numb. I don't want to be a zombie. I don't want to suppress and escape reality anymore. I truly, for the first time in my life, feel ready to just be here as me and not need to escape or suppress. And so it's an interesting journey. And I just want to talk a little bit, get your insights on maybe, I guess, what and I'm sure it's different for every single person. I know we're all unique beings, but what your thoughts are on, I guess, the spiritual side of addiction, and on any thoughts on what may cause addiction in a lot of people. If there are I know like trauma is probably involved for a lot of people, but like the mechanics of addiction, I guess I would like to understand as much about it as I can. So as I go through this healing process, I'm more well equipped to deal with these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a very serious issue that's facing a lot of people right now, in one way or another. And like you said, yeah, there's traumas behind it all, not behind all forms of addiction. Not every form of addiction is created because of a trauma someone has or has personally experienced. Some of it is also what we call generational curses. So it's something that's normalized within a family. It's something that becomes part of the family identity. This is true of my own family with alcohol, especially. It's a big identifier within the family, and some of the members of the family can do that responsibly, and some of them just can't. But that's another part of it when it becomes normalized. In that aspect of it, as a generational curse or as a family story, when it becomes normalized, not just a healthy or a balanced use of something like that, but when you start to see abuse of it, and that abuse becomes normalized, that creates a way of behavior that I don't want to use the word normalize again, but I can't think of a better word to use there, that normalizes it for you. You think, oh, well, I see my family doing it. I see my friends doing it. I see this as just a normal part of reality. So there's not really a big deal. And that's one of the ways that it works. Another way that it works on that same line of a generational curse is that it can actually be an ancestor. We can actually get ancestors that nest in us or on us and feed off of us that had an addiction problem. I mean, I've seen it before, and I've heard other people who are in the healing field where, not every alcoholic or every substance abuser that comes in the door has an ancestor that's leading them down that path. But there is this occurrence that happens from time to time where you are working with someone and you realize there's an ancestor there. You do the work to free that ancestor or help that ancestor elevate. And then without anything else, and oftentimes without even much of any type of withdrawal, the client just starts to function normally again. And it truly brings to mind that it wasn't their issue in those scenarios. It was an ancestral issue. But the other thing that happens is trauma. We have a trauma in our life, and we start to dislike that trauma. And if the trauma was great enough, it can create a soul loss. And a soul loss is where a bit of your vital energy is taken offline. And that bit of vital energy that gets taken offline reduces the amount of processing power you have as a being in this world. So then your ups don't feel as up, your lows don't feel as low. You kind of just feel like you're in a lull or in a null zone where nothing feels quite great enough or small enough, and those types of traumas, they lead to abuse in a whole different way with substances. They can lead to the type of abuse where the person is trying to normalize themselves, so trying to self-medicate. What they're really trying to do is be the way they perceive the rest of reality being, and they think that the substance or whatever helps them to step into that area. And with those type of cases, soul retrieval oftentimes starts the ball of the healing of that. But those type of situations usually do have a good bit of withdrawal with them and stuff like that. And then also the integration, because there's a reason a soul part left. And that soul part left because it holds a memory of that trauma. It holds some portion of that memory that is too uncomfortable for the psyche to accept anymore. So for the psyche to be able to move forward in life, it has to kind of turn off a part of itself that holds this pain, because it can't qualify that pain. It can't figure out why it had to go through that pain. So it's easier for the being to just kind of shut that off by removing that part of themselves. When that doesn't happen, there's another related thing that we call soul fracture. And a soul fracture isn't where your entire soul piece is lost. It's just where there's a fracture in you, where there's this separation that you put between parts of yourself. And oftentimes that also has elements of substance abuse in it, because when those parts come online, when something triggers it, we call it an imprint oftentimes, but when something triggers the emotional mental matrix that is encoded around that trauma, the person doesn't want to feel it, so they go running toward some type of substance. And the type of substance that they go running toward kind of shows, a bit of the spiritual quality of what they're dealing with. Is it a painkiller? Is it an upper? Is it a depressant? What is the substance itself? How does it work on the central nervous system? That gives us some clues as to the nature of the addiction, the nature of how the person is using the addiction, such as like cocaine and even caffeine and things like that. People use that when they don't feel strong enough, when they don't feel like they have enough energy. They don't feel like they're vital enough in their life. They don't feel like they're, that they're important, or that they can do what they need to do. So they take things like that to up that up, and that's true of things like crystal meth as well, and things like that, that people get addicted to. Oftentimes it's out of a need to try to feel normal, and they just don't feel like they have enough energy to really apply toward the things that they're trying to accomplish. And the other thing, and I'm going to kind of stop here so that we can move into another part of this. But another thing is like there's something we call like Kyle's spirits. And some of them are really big types of spirits, and other ones are smaller, minor types of spirits. But they're spirits that could see a potential in you. Say you like alcohol or you like some other substance, and these could be spirits of the dead that were addicted to these substances or something else. But somehow you came into an environment where they were, and they got to taste your energy, and they got to see the behaviors you do, and they got to say, hey, you know what? I can't get my fix anymore because I'm not in a body. But I think maybe this person, if I just kind of, give them a little emphasis here and there, whisper in the air now and then, yeah, it's all right, take another drink, that I will be able, when they start to go unconscious from that, I'll be able to slip in and experience this thing again. This thing that is keeping me from moving forward in my own life, my own soul's progression. I can enjoy that through a living being, and that's another way that these things work. And that's one of the reasons I think that in like things like AA and NA and stuff, they talk about you really need to clear up. You're not just cleaning up your own body and getting off the substance. You got to clean up your social world too. You can't go to the places you used to go. One, because of the temptation. But on another level, on a spiritual level, because you'll be commingling with spirits that enjoy those activities, not just the humans that enjoy it, but spirits that like to congregate around those humans who are enjoying that experience, and those spirits will kind of egg you on to doing it. And so, if you get yourself cleaned up, you get your friends cleaned up, and you get that spiritual quality out of your life that may be kind of egging you on, you can see really rapid change happen in a person. But there's always one thing you want to ask someone if you're working with them with addiction, and that is, are you ready? Mm-hmm. Are you really ready to put it down? Because until then, they can put it down a little bit and pick it back up because they're not ready to face whatever it is. And there's no shame in that. It's all in everyone's time. We all have to find the right time. Like you said, when it just clicks and you're suddenly like, you know what? I don't want any of that stuff now. Mm-hmm. I just want, I just want what I am. I just want who I am. And you realize that those things, when you can truly see that they aren't supplementing you with anything. I even see this in the shamanic community with people doing wachuma and people doing like ayahuasca and stuff like that. They get, it's not a physical addiction, but they get a psychological addiction that, hey, they can't be, or they can't heal, or they can't move forward in their life without this thing.
Yeah.
And that's really sad too, because yeah, sure, it can be something that temporarily helps you, but really the work is yours to do without it. And nothing's more sad than especially a medicine worker that just has to rely on something like that to get into the proper state of mind to do their work. And that's only sad because it's something outside of yourself. And it's also something that can bring all kinds of legal repercussions, especially in our culture, and other types of repercussions into your life that you may not really want to have to deal with, So, and that's why, it's very important, and why I stress so much learning how to tap into trance states without those things.
Yeah.
Because the people who can do that, I know from personal experience, but I can also say, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, there's no substitute for your own ability to go into trance and journey.
Oh yeah.
There's no substitute for that. And those things that might seem like the golden ticket to get in there, for someone who already knows how to get in there, once they and then they do something like that, they suddenly realize, wait, this doesn't help as much as I thought it did.
Yeah.
This doesn't clarify those lenses as much as I once thought it did, you know.
Yeah, I've actually had a major aversion to psychedelics for a long time. Uh, because my ability to tap in and perceive spirit, to go into trance and travel and all of this stuff is so strong, it would become overwhelming. I could tap in so much that I guess and as I would go through periods where I start to tap in, use my psychic abilities more, perceive more of the layers of reality, journey, experience spirit, and then as I would practice that on a daily basis, it would get stronger and stronger and stronger. The sensations would become clearer and stronger, and it would get so overwhelming that it would freak me out, like I was going to lose my mind or something. And then I'd go into a period of taking a lot of depressant type substances to suppress that and make me feel more grounded and stable and safe, like that was going to protect me. And so the idea of taking like even just mushrooms or something like that for a long time was just terrifying to me, because I'm like, that's what I'm taking these substances to avoid, because my natural tendency is to be there, like a lot, like in an unbalanced way. And so I think that's just a big thing for me, is learning balance. And also I've realized, you said it to me during a healing session, maybe a year or two ago, something like that. But you brought it to my attention as we were going through this process. I was receiving a healing for addiction, and you even asked me, I think, at one point, you're like, "Are you really ready to give this up?" And at the time, I was like, "Yeah, I am." And you're like, "I don't believe you." And at the time, I kind of sat there and thought about it, and I was like, "Yeah, maybe I'm not. I don't think I really am ready."
Yeah, there's another. Go ahead.
We went through that healing, and you brought to my attention, you're like, "Hey, why do you hate yourself so much?" And so that came up, and I never realized that I did. Like, there was a part of me that really hated myself. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing thinking, because I'm just making this connection now about all of that. And then right before I would finally truly felt ready this time to be free of all of that, Eris and I laid down together, and we went into a healing journey kind of at the same time. We're both kind of doing the same type of thing at the same time. And we both addressed these aspects of ourselves that hate us, these parts of ourselves that hate ourselves. And I brought us into a space where we could address the embodiment of it. See that an embodied version of that part of us that is self-sabotaging, that beats us up and causes us so much suffering. And I had us look from both perspectives, from the perspective of the part of us that hates ourselves, like beating us up and causing so much pain and suffering. And I saw it like embodied as like I had a sword, and I was like cutting into myself and then healing myself and punching myself and then like just beating myself bloody and like saying all these nasty things of like you fucked your life up, like how, like you've done so much shit, like you're the reason that this person died, and like really, horrible, heavy things that I'm saying to me. And then we went from the perspective of the one receiving all of that punishment. And then I had us kind of perceive like I brought a light in, and then brought some like a I don't know what it was. It was a particular frequency of energy that brought about clarity, so that both sides could see that we're just wounded. The one who was receiving the punishment could see that the one giving the punishment was just very wounded and was like a little kid that was just lashing out, that didn't know any better, and then the one who was doing the lashing out could see the innocence and how horrible it is what they were doing to this person, where they couldn't see that before. And then I actually had us open our hearts up to that part of ourselves that hates us. And I had us, like embrace them. And even though it felt painful and scary, like agree, like, hey, we don't have to fight against each other. We can work together. We are one. We can be one, and we can move forward in love and union together. And that was really, and right around when that happened, I was taking again about 60 grams a day of kratom, which is a lot. And it had felt, I thought it felt good. I was totally numb and now I can see how bad I actually felt. But around that time, right after we did that, it stopped going from being this comfortable depressant to giving me like horrible panic attacks, to the point where I would take my dose of kratom, and it would feel like I almost needed to go to the hospital because my heart was pounding so fast and so hard.
Yeah.
It's like I was having a heart attack. And then for a few days, for several days, maybe even almost a week, I was trying to figure out what the cause was. And I thought it was this. I thought it was because I had lowered my nicotine dose. I knew something was wrong. So I lowered my nicotine dose to half, and then I cut it in half again. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm in nicotine withdrawals, and that's why I'm feeling uncomfortable. And then so then I raised my nicotine level back up, and I was like, all right, I'll take it more slowly. And it was still happening. And my mind was going crazy. It was going in circles, a million miles a minute, trying to figure out what's wrong with me. What do I need to change in order to feel better? Trying to figure it out and fix it. And then one night, as I was having this really horrible panic attack, I just laid down and I was like, I give up. Like, I surrender. Like, take this from me, Spirit, and show me, what do I need to do? Like, please guide me. What do I need to do in order to be free of this intense suffering? Like, just show me. And I totally surrendered. I let go of the mind completely. And again, my heart was pounding a million miles a minute. It's so much painful, uncomfortable, anxious energy. And I just totally let go and surrender. I was like, if it kills me, that's fine. I'm just going to lay here and just be totally present to it. And after a while of being totally present to it, all of a sudden out of that, there kind of slowly bubbled up this clarity, where I couldn't see it before, but I had this clarity. I realized every single time I had one of these panic attacks, it was right about the time that my dose of kratom would kick in. And for some reason, I couldn't see that before. And so then as soon as I kind of realized that, I could see my guides around me, my angels and dragons, et cetera. And I asked them, I was like, is it the kratom that's doing this to me? And in unison, they were all like, yes. And then, and it came, and so I asked 3 more times, and they said yes each time. And I can feel when my guides say things, there are some things that come through on this particular frequency, and the way that it feels, where I call it the truth frequency. Where I know every time they've told me anything on that particular frequency, it's always been true. And it came through on that frequency. And so I was like, okay. Yeah. I can either, and so then I had the choice. I was like, do I try and wean off? And if so, it's going to be months and months of suffering and dealing with these panic attacks while I lower my dose. Or would it be better to just quit cold turkey off of 60 grams a day and deal with the withdrawals? And I'm like, honestly, I don't think I can endure taking another dose. So it was my birthday, April 7th, was my last dose at nighttime. That was when I had all this big realization, was on my birthday. And then my first full day of sobriety was the total solar eclipse. Wow. And so I was declaring to the I was declaring, because you said with the eclipse the last time you were on here, that you can kind of declare, like, who you want to be, and then as the eclipse comes up, let your shadows come up and all the things that are preventing you from being that, and then receive the code. So I was just declaring, like I want to just be here, accept reality, be myself. I don't want to escape reality anymore. I just want to be here and enjoy life and be present for all of it and accept my reality. And I was putting all that out there, and then the eclipse happened, and so much fear came up of, can I do this? Am I going to be able to handle this? All these things, and all kinds of other things came up too. And then the light came back, and I just felt this knowing of light. And then later that day, I had like a wave of really bad, like sick, like nausea, sick feeling, like flu-like feelings and anxiety. And I just had this feeling. I'm like, I can do this. Like I got this. I don't need to run away anymore. Like, even if it gets really uncomfortable, I can handle that. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, now it's been almost a week, and I'm definitely through the worst of the withdrawals. The worst was probably, I would say, day 2 was probably the worst of it. And that was when I actually went over to Eris's parents' place for a brunch, and I was over there, and I was going to stay longer and help them repot some plants and stuff like that. But right before we were getting ready to eat, I just felt like I had such an intense flu, but also like a ton of anxiety. And then I was like, I have to go right now, or I might pass out on driving on the way home. And I was driving. It was a half-hour drive. I was driving home, and I literally felt like I was going to lose consciousness several times. And so, but I made it home safe, and I laid down, and I just kind of rested as much as I could through that. And then the next day, I actually had a really good day. Day after that, it was a little more uncomfortable, and then today, I feel the best I felt since I.
Awesome, man. And thank you so much for telling your story, because I know there's people out there that's really going to help, especially with the ability that you have to be vulnerable. You know, you're not holding anything back. I can attest to that. You're telling them the whole story, man. You're telling even the parts that weren't comfortable for you, and you're wearing it on your sleeve, and that's just beautiful. That's the stuff that really helps people out there, because that's the stuff they're afraid of. And if no one ever talks about those things, you know, that just becomes this unknown that's always afraid. Yeah, it's hard to get clean. It's hard to get off of a substance. It can be really hard, but when you know it's the time, like you said, you know, that's the thing. You knew it was the time. You didn't enjoy it anymore. You didn't want it anymore, and it was just and you really realized. And only the person can do this. And sure, you can do interventions with people and tell them, hey, this is how you're affecting me and stuff. But really, it's an internal thing that they have to process. They have to come to that place themselves, or otherwise, it's just like a Band-Aid over and over again. And, eventually it will come to the right time for most everyone. Most everyone will grow. And that's another thing, as our frequency rises, we start to grow out of certain frequencies. And every substance creates a frequency vibration. And sometimes we just suddenly enter a frequency where we're just like, hey man, I can't drink coffee anymore. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done with the bean. I'm getting out the bean, and you just know that. It's something you just know in your heart, and you're just like, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. And when that's the place you're at, and of course, fortifying that with spiritual practices, just like in a sense, I think this came up just naturally for you, but it came up naturally at such an opportune moment. Your birthday followed by the eclipse. These are the moments you chose, and maybe you didn't choose them because they were the moments coming up. But isn't that cool how the universe played out? That it gave you that energy to put this into, to help support you with that. And just that alone, and knowing that is going on, that's another thing that's so very important. Yeah, you can get clean without spirituality, but it's so much easier if you got something you can believe in and something that you can rely on, and you can tap into. That just really helps so much. It brings a comfort and a support that you just can't explain. And I just want to say to all you people out there, spirituality doesn't mean you have to dress a certain way, or that you have to, that it's one of these religions you have to follow. Spirituality also is something in here you just know. It's something that just makes sense in your life. And it doesn't matter if you call it God, if you call it Jesus, if you call it the great universal unknown, or the mystery, or whatever. It's that thing that you just is inside of your heart, that kind of just lives with you, and you experience life. And it's just kind of like this, it is the experiencer. And when you have that, and you can really step into that, some people call it the witness or the observer. But when you can step into those states where you can see life from a different, I call it a meta position, like metaphysics. It's not the position of my day-to-day egoic self, and it's not the position of like some fantastical or modeled out idea of reality. It's like this moment where you can slip out and you can see all reality from another perspective. And that really helps, because you can see these things. And from that sight, this is one of the important things about healing from these things. From that sight, it's all love, right? Because you are one with the spirit that moves in all of us. And in those moments, it's all love. So you don't look at yourself like, oh, I'm ashamed of who I am, or I'm ashamed of what I've been. As long as you're hitting it from shame, or you're hitting it from guilt, or you're hitting it from any of those places, you're going to continue to have a rough time with it. Because those things are uncomfortable emotions and feelings we have. And yeah, they can make you, you can use them wisely in a moment. They're like reframing. You can use them wisely in one moment to help you make an action, or to commit to an action. But if you do them long term, they become something that you then want to escape from. They actually draw your energy out of you after a while, and so they will perpetuate the state of being. They will perpetuate the addiction as a way to escape from the shame that you feel for being addicted to something. You know,
Mhm.
that's another thing that people don't always look at. You know, in the short term, yeah, it has a lot of power to for someone in like an intervention to say, "Oh, you've let me down, and you've let me down in this way." That has a lot of power. It has a lot of weight. But the problem is, oftentimes with addiction, you're not capable of holding the weight you already have. So throwing some more weight on there, it makes you feel defeated. And when you feel defeated, you just give up. You know,
Mhm.
and so it's important to when you're tackling an addiction, it's important to tackle it from all areas. It's important to get the right mindsets going. It's important to rely on spirituality and to have hope and faith that you'll get through it and things like that. And it's important to actually remove the people from your lives that are connected to whatever substance you're trying to rid yourself of. The places you used to go, your old haunts. There's a reason they're called haunts, right?
Mhm.
And to think of it that way, I haunt this place. Well, that's because that place is also haunted by the spirits of the memory or the action or the behavior.
Yeah.
And so you have to really just try to clean up all those things, and it just makes everything a whole lot simpler.
I want to pull this up. So this is when I was talking about that healing of confronting that aspect of ourselves that hate ourselves. Eris was commenting on that and says, "This was so powerful. I'm still integrating. I feel whole and notice my shadows are so much more on the surface, not buried as much within me. It's been an intense integration." And then she said, when you were talking about, I noticed it came through as you were saying, like maybe you realize it's time to give up the bean. Eris commented, "As I'm making coffee."
Yeah, I mean that's just the beauty of it all, and that process that you and her did is very beautiful, because we were just talking about that observer, that spirit that moves in all of us, that different meta position. And when you can step into that position and you can look at any part of your life from it, and that's what you and Eris did. I'm just giving you a different language for it, but that's what you two did. You saw this corruption, if you want to put it that way, or this mildew and rot, because I like power words like that, but you saw this mildew and rot inside of yourself, that this almost like demonic form of yourself. But then at some point, you both were able to view it from the eyes of compassion, from
Mhm.
the eyes of love, and from, we're one, we're part, and you were able to do that for each other at the same time. While
Yeah.
watching each other go through that, you were able to hold each other in this container of love. And I mean, love really can help change anything, man. And that's the whole thing. When you're trying to conquer anything in your life, if you can step into that witness, if you can step into that observer, that meta position, and look at your life and not judge it, but just look at it. And then from that same compassionate place, make a different choice. Because from that compassionate place, you realize it doesn't matter what choice you really make, but you're more empowered to make the choice you'd like to make. And that's just a beautiful thing. And you crystallize that so well with that story and what you two did.
Yeah, it was so powerful. Um, I was going to say something, it totally left me. I was just looking at the comments that came through, to be honest. Eris was saying this conversation is so incredible. Thank you. And I did want to mention also that Eris, 2 weeks before I believe it was around 2 weeks before I gave up kratom, she gave up kratom as well. So that was also, I think, a part of it. Is and she had weaned down. She wasn't as on as high of a dose as I was. She was on like 10 grams a day, but she's also a lot more sensitive, so it could have been about the same level of effect. So she weaned down a little bit and then got off, and I'm just so proud of her for navigating through everything the way that she is, and she's doing so great. I've seen her; she has her waves of intense emotions that come up, and she's just so beautiful. She's getting better and better all the time at just allowing them to flow through, and yeah, I'm really, really proud of her. And it was just so beautiful that in just, and 2 weeks is really, in the grand scheme of things, such a short amount of time. It's so close together that we both came to the same decision that we needed to be totally free of this.
That's
So I'm
beautiful.
just so grateful for that. And it feels so good to have her by my side supporting me. It makes all of this a lot more doable and bearable and easy, to know that she's there loving me and supporting me through it. And I'm there for her as well. And that makes everything so much better and easier. And Era says, thank you, Casey. You're so welcome. Thank you. I love you so much.
I'm very proud of both of you. That this is big stuff. This is big work to do. It's not easy to change the self. It's not easy to get over a habit. It's not easy to do any of those things. And just to do it and then to be in the middle of doing it and still be able to create a supportive container for another going through it. That's just beautiful. Not everyone could do that. That would be too much pressure for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I love what we have. I'm so grateful for it. It's just, I never knew that a relationship like this was possible. I didn't know that I could have a relationship that was so healthy and supportive, that had so much healthy and honest communication, so much openness. Like, I didn't know it was possible to experience this before I met Eris. And
Yeah.
I've said before, I've learned so much about myself and
Yeah, I
about
feel the
how to.
same way about Patricia. I mean, really, it's when you find someone who's just your person. That's the only way I know how to explain it. When you find your person,
Yeah,
it's an amazing thing for sure.
yeah. So I want to jump in. I want to talk about sleep because we were mentioning this a little bit before, when we were about to start the live stream. But one of the big symptoms of withdrawals, especially from opioids, and then Eric, I want to pull this up before I get into that. Eric says, "You're my person." I love you so much. But yeah, so sleep and insomnia is one of the biggest symptoms of kratom or any kind of opioid withdrawal. And so that's something that really freaked me out because there was a time in my life where I had really bad insomnia, and that was part of what led me into the psych ward. And so I have a lot of trauma around not sleeping and that being something that'll lead me to really bad places. And so that's something that had in the past prevented me from trying to get off of certain substances, or at least delaying it for a long time,
Yeah.
And so I read some really beautiful advice online where someone said, hey, you're going to have trouble sleeping when you're coming off of a habit like this, especially if you cold turkey. But instead of pressuring yourself to sleep, and this implies whether you're going through withdrawals or if you're just having insomnia in general for whatever reason. I think this is really beautiful. So instead of sitting there and saying, okay, it's time to sleep, and then trying really hard to sleep, and then getting all frustrated that you're not able to fall asleep, and then getting anxious about it, that's very much not conducive to sleep, those emotions and those energies.
No.
So instead, if you give yourself a really big window, say it's like 12 hours from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. or something like that, you have this 12-hour window, and within that 12-hour window, you try and get as much sleep as you can, but you don't force it at any point. So maybe at the beginning of that window, maybe for a couple hours, you're not tired yet. So you listen to some music, or you read a book, or listen to an audiobook, and you just hang out and enjoy yourself. It's just nighttime. It's quiet. There's no one to disturb you. So you just enjoy whatever you're doing. And then maybe after 2 hours, you start to feel a little bit tired. So you take the headphones off, and maybe you drift off for an hour, and then you wake back up. And then maybe you're not ready to go back to sleep again. So maybe you listen to the audiobook some more, or do some journaling, or whatever you'd like to do. And then maybe you're feeling a little bit tired again. So maybe you drift off for 2 hours that time. And so maybe it takes you 12 hours to get 5 hours of sleep. But 5 hours of sleep is so much better than zero, And so I've been kind of using that as that's how I've been thinking about it these nights. And last night was decent. I think using that exact kind of formula, I think I got about 5 or 6 hours of sleep, which is not too bad. And then the night before that, though, I actually got almost 8 hours of sleep, which is incredible. And I think the reason I didn't get as much last night was that Eris and I had an event at Sacred Waters Kava Bar in North Olmsted. It was a beautiful healing event, and it was just so wonderful, and I was feeling really, just so grateful and full of love for life, because it was my first thing like this since being clean and sober, and it felt just so good to feel all of that and be so clean and clear. And then I got home, and it was just, it was hard to kind of wind down and get ready for sleep from that. And then also I had restless limb syndrome, and I specifically say limb syndrome instead of leg syndrome because it was mostly in my arms. But that hit me at one point last night. I was trying to sleep, and then my arms would just have these intense, and I don't know how to describe it. If you've never had restless leg syndrome, it's hard to describe, but it's like this. Your body your muscles want to contract, and it feels like there's this buildup of intense sensation and energy where you like have to move, or it's like painfully uncomfortable not to like contract and move your muscles. And it always happens like right as you're about to fall asleep. You get these intense, uncomfortable, like restless muscle sensations. And
Wow.
So yeah, that hit me a few times last night, and so that's part of the reason why I didn't get as much sleep as well. But again, there are other times when I've come off of substances where I've gone days without any sleep. And this time I've gotten sleep every single night of the whole experience. Some nights it was only like 4 hours. Sometimes it was 8 hours, but I've gotten some at least every night. And so that was just such a huge shift. And just thinking about it that way of like, hey, 12 hours, get as much sleep as you can. If you're not sleeping, don't force it. Just enjoy yourself. That really helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just that's great advice. And it's so beautiful that we are now in an age where you could look something up like that, kratom withdrawals, and you can get people's real life experiences and what they've done to help themselves. Back in the 90s and especially the 80s, you wouldn't have been able to do that with something new like kratom. It'd take a long time for the news to hit the streets on how to deal with that, and how to get through that. It might be 10 years before people could get that level of sharing. And now that we're a global community in all ways, spirituality and everything else, it's just so ramped up, the speed and the ease that we can really kind of gear our own lives with now, just from this available resource that we have of the internet. And that's just something beautiful. And what you pointed out there, like you were saying, you were talking about it from kratom withdrawals, but you also said this is applicable for any time you can't sleep. And it is. And the reason why is, say I'm laying there and I can't sleep. And now I start to wonder, well, why I can't sleep. What's going on in my life that's keeping me from sleeping? And all of that kind of stuff. And what that does is that brings me up into high processing mode, what we call beta brainwave state. And the beta brainwave state is not conducive to relaxation or sleep, because that's not what it's for. The lower level of beta waves is for when you're learning, when you're trying to process brand new information, not when you're embodying that information and have developed whatever it was giving you. But when you're trying to embody new information, you're real alert, right? You're really, really alert, trying to get every piece of that information. And then, you might be in a lecture or something, and then something happens where it clicks and you get it and you go into more a dreamy state. Like all of a sudden you imagine what that's like, or you can see, you just know it somehow. And that's the alpha state of being. And we go in and out of these all the time. But when we're sitting there worried, why can't I get to sleep? If I don't get to sleep now, I'm not going to get this many hours and all of that. We throw ourselves up in the high beta waves, even if our eyes are shut, where when we shut our eyes, that naturally puts us into an alpha state. But if we're throwing ourselves back up into that high processing state, you're not going to sleep there, because that's the state that at the lower levels is learning. The upper levels is fight or flight. And that's when you're in danger. And when you're in danger, your body doesn't want you to sleep. So when you're sitting there and you're getting afraid that you're in danger of not getting enough sleep, then you throw yourself into like this little fight or flight, and then you're not going to get sleep because you just released adrenaline into your system. And then when that starts to wear off, you're going to be extremely exhausted, feel kind of burnt out, but maybe you're still not going to be able to get to sleep, So it's all about being able to gear down into alpha. Of course, alpha is not where you fall asleep. You fall asleep in theta, and deep sleep is delta. But alpha is the doorway to those deeper states, and it's how you enter into that. So, one of the ways that I use when I can't sleep, and it's not always a bad thing when I can't sleep. I'm not always like, oh, I got to do something because I can't sleep. I need to be able to sleep right now. But if I've just laid down to sleep, or I've been asleep a couple hours and I wake up and I just have a lot of energy, what I'll do is I will focus down into my heart and down into my body. And by that, I don't mean I'm thinking about what my body's feeling. And I don't mean that I'm thinking about being in my heart. I mean, I actually go down into the body itself. And I don't know how to describe it more than that, but those of you out there who know what I'm talking about, you've been able to just go down into your body. Try that the next time you're trying to go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Just drop into your body and you'll drop into the lower alpha state. And then from there, it's very easy to actually use something like counting sheep or counting backwards or any of these things that people tell you to do to help you go to sleep. But you can't do that from the beta state, because at the beta state, you're doing math. You're counting sheep and it's math. You got to do that from that alpha state, that body state, not the mind. And when you count from the body state, it's a whole different thing too. You know, it's like when you're meditating and you can feel the thoughts coming and you can hear them and they buzz by you. That's where I'm talking about. When you go into that state and then count sheep from that state, you'll probably get through maybe 20 sheep and go to sleep, or count backwards from 100 to 50. And the next thing you know, you're asleep, you know. So that's one of the ways I use. I used to also use breathing, really slow circular breathing. And once again, that's what that will do, is it gets you into your body, because you're noticing the breath coming in. And then you're noticing that breath going out. And at first, you're putting all your awareness on not having a pause between those breaths. And then after a while, that becomes natural. So you don't have to really focus on that anymore, but you're still focusing on the breath. And the feeling, you know, feeling it goes across your nostril and your nasal passage and down your throat, and then feeling it come back up, and just getting into those body sensations. It sounds like that would make you really awake and active. But really, if you're already tired, and you know you're tired, that will just put you down into a lower gear where you can go to sleep, or you can go into deep meditation. And both of us know that if you get about 20, 30 minutes of deep meditation, or even an hour of really deep meditation, you wake up feeling like you just had 6 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
You know, it can really do that for you. So that's the other thing. If you're not able to actually get all the way into that unconscious sleep state, if you don't get really worried about it and pop yourself up into beta, you can get into a really nice alpha state meditation, and that will rejuvenate you. So yeah, you don't fall asleep, but you're in this nice relaxed state where your body is still getting rest, and there is still regeneration happening and things like that. Not as much as deep sleep, but hey, you take what you can get on those nights.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very fortunate to have spent also a lot of time practicing entering into alpha and theta brainwave states and entering into those trance states. I've practiced that a lot, and so that's one thing that has really helped as well. I'll lay there and I know how, like, for me, it's mostly just I drop down into the body, but then I also just kind of take that, like, how you put it, that meta position where I just am the observer, you know, not thinking, you know, just observing purely as the awareness itself without being aware of anything in particular. Right. And just being in that space, then I kind of lay there and I can just I can almost feel my brainwaves starting to like slowly dip down further and further. And then maybe I kind of level out at like low alpha or high theta for a while, and I might, but at that point, I'm not even really aware of much. I'm not really, I'm like, I know I'm awake, but it's also like, I'm not worried about anything. There's no real thoughts. It's just kind of this dreamy type state. And then I'll maybe hang out there for a while. And then next thing I know, I've woken up and it's been like 3 hours later, you know? And so,
yeah. And you feel pretty good. It's not like a whole night of sleep, but you feel pretty good.
Yeah, it is. And I've done that a lot during the day too before, where like if I am having a lot of like anxiety or stress or feeling really heavy or depressed or sick or whatever it is, if I just lay down and I enter into like, especially if I can get to theta, and I know when I'm in theta because I start to experience hypnagogic imagery, which if people aren't familiar with that, it's like right as you're falling asleep, you start to see images behind your eyes, but you're not dreaming, you're not asleep yet, you know you're awake, but you start to see like images as if you're actually seeing it projected on the back of your eyelids. And so I know when I hit those hypnagogic images, I'm in Theta. And if I can get down to Theta and stay there, even like you said, even for just like 20 minutes, and then I come out of that, I do really feel rejuvenated completely. And it
Yeah.
can completely shift me out of whatever state I was in, whatever uncomfortable state I was in, into back to more of a neutral, peaceful, comfortable, grounded state. So it's really powerful, very powerful tool to have in your toolbox for anyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I, when you were saying all that, it reminded me, I used to always notice when I was a kid, before I went to sleep, I would know that I was about to go to sleep because I would see on the back of my eyelids this flower motif.
Yeah.
This is a motif of like a bunch of flowers. And that was like my sweet spot as a kid. I knew if I was there, I was about to go to sleep. And I love that experience too, of
Yeah.
just seeing those patterns. But for me, especially, they were like a flower motif, like something you'd see on an old like wallpaper or something. But
Yeah.
and as soon as that would start to, and it would just be like one or two at first. I would just see like, and then all of a sudden it was like they would just creep out, the whole motif would creep out of the ethers, and I would just see it like undulating in front of me, and the next thing I'd be gone.
A lot of times I'll see like shifting scenes where like maybe I'll see a landscape, like it'll be like a mountain scene or something, and then that may shift to like randomly the scene of like a city and like being on a street with cars driving down it, and like, I'll just see shifting scenes of different things, like
Mhm.
just kind of like ambiguous scenes, like nothing in particular happening, no like focal point or story to it, just like a scenery.
Yeah,
I'll,
yeah.
I'll see that, and they'll flash and they'll change from one scene to the next. And same thing, since I was a kid, I've known once I see the scenes like that starting to shift, I know I'm about to fall asleep, and I love to be in that state. It feels so
Yeah.
good to be in that state.
Yeah, absolutely. And then especially as a kid, I mean, I still get this today, but also just how images could just override the reality you're in. Like a wood grain, looking at a wood grain pattern, and the next thing you know, a story's playing out in wood grain, like in a wood grain world, and you're watching this whole like story and stuff, and it can be really cool. Of course, that's a way more alert state, but that was something that I always loved and enjoyed in my youth. Just the power of my imagination is what I called it. Of course, now I understand the imagination as a doorway, that it's an actual thing to be developed through your lifetime. As children, it's something that, our parents are like, yeah, imagination's good, but, it's just, you'll grow out of it someday. Well, some of us don't.
Yeah, I
And
see
we
the
learn to
imagination.
use it.
For me, imagination, that is our senses. It's our senses. It's what we use to sense reality beyond this one particular physical dimension of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I do want to pull this up before, because we're almost at an hour here, but I want to pull this up. Era says, question for Zane. Do you have any recommendations for assisting shadow integration and eclipse integration? I feel like I'm having to ground myself all the time. During the eclipse, when the sun was coming back out, I felt the collective fear and feelings of unsafety in my body, and I held it all in unconditional love.
Well, that goes a long way right there, just holding it in unconditional love. Integration, it's all about integration. It's all about finding ways to remain comfortable while you're experiencing something uncomfortable. That's really what it is. And one of the best ways of doing that is just what Casey and I were talking about. Maybe he could help you if you don't have a good grip on that, but just learning to dial down into alpha. You can still deal with issues and problems in alpha. In fact, you deal with them better. It's like you're dealing with them from genius mentality when
Yeah.
you're in the alpha state. But when you're in the beta state, that's when you really feel the full impact of fear. And because that's where fight or flight is, and that's how it makes you feel: fight or flight, anger or fear, or freeze. And those are the only options you have up there in that beta state, especially the high beta state. But if you can learn to slow that down, slowing down your breathing is a good way. Another good way is to take your hand and just put it on your heart. The center of your chest is what I mean by your heart, and you will feel your heartbeat and everything. And then just start breathing in, slowly breathing in, slowly breathing out. And actually imagine you're breathing in and out through your heart. Feel the warmth of your hand on your heart. Feel your heartbeat. Feel all of those things. And even if you're still noticing something terrifying or you're still dealing with a shadow aspect, what happens is you'll just kind of shift at one point. And when you make that little shift, suddenly you don't feel it as intensely, or you don't feel it the same way. You can look at it from a different place. That's another way that we can go into that door of the observer, going through the field of the heart, because the heart just looks at everything. It doesn't judge anything. The heart just loves, right? So if we fall into our heart like that, and we're right there, then even if we can even still have these shadow projections or these things playing off, but we're going to experience them just a slight bit different. And that slight bit difference makes so much difference in our lives and our capacity to deal with it. It
Yeah.
takes down that intensity and dials it down.
Yeah, so Eric, this is all the work we've done together in trance, going into trance, and then also presence. So Eris and I have done a lot of work around this, but I'm so glad that you just said all of that, because sometimes hearing it from another perspective, really helps to make it click, and it's like, Eris, for me, I know through this process of integrating and healing from the kratom withdrawals, so many times when I've had really intense feelings of anxiety or restlessness or depression or whatever, when it comes up, that's my immediate reaction, is to lower my brainwave frequency, bring myself into trance, and then same thing, go from that meta position, that observer, that presence, and just be there and witness it from that lowered brainwave state, from that place of just being the observer. And then it's not so, it can be really uncomfortable, and I can feel it all, but it doesn't bother me so much, and I'm able to just kind of be present and hold it there. And then like you said, after a certain amount of time, and usually I'll just be observing like that from that alpha state, and then being very present. And at a certain point, I feel myself kind of dip down a little bit lower in brainwave frequency. And then it's like, right as that happens, there's that shift you were talking about. That shift happens. And then sometimes I'll even actually nod off for like a minute. I'll like fall asleep for just like a minute. And then as soon as I'm out of that, I'm like, wow, like I totally shifted out of that. And it's
Absolutely.
totally integrated. So yeah, definitely. I totally agree 100% with Zane's advice on that.
And the other thing you can do is, once you're there and you can observe it from that other state, and you're observing it from that other state, you can then start to dial in, and I mean dial in, an elevated emotion. And that gets a little tricky. And we hear things like that all the time in metaphysics and spiritual work and everything. And then people label what that emotion is. They'll say it's love, or you're dialing in gratitude, or you're dialing in this. And my whole thing with that is, those labels don't really give you what that elevated emotion is. You might say, oh, enthusiasm. And enthusiasm to me could be an anxious state. What I think of as enthusiasm could be an anxious state, or happiness. That could be an anxious state for me. And even if I still experience it as being happy, it could be anxious. So what you're really trying to do is dial in the state of emotion, or the state of feeling that feels good to you at that time, whatever that state is. And, and it's different for everyone. That's the whole thing. Everyone's neurology is different, and everyone's elevated state is different. And we have different ones. I even have an elevated state that I get to from a feeling of sadness. There's a way that I can step into an elevated trance state of life through sadness. And because it was one of the first, and I think the reason why is it was one of the first ways I found to step into those elevated states was through an experience of sadness. So it became a door that I could use. And that might sound weird, especially to people who are, get too fundamental on a thought like, oh, it has to be happiness, or it has to be gratitude. No, it's got to be what's right for you, what you can dial in, and you'll know it. You'll know what that feeling is. And maybe you can label it one of those names, or maybe you can't because it's something in between. But it's really important to play with those, your conscious states when you go into those alpha, especially alpha or theta, to play with your consciousness and dial in what's right for you. Doesn't mean that you're not still looking at what's going on or integrating, but when you dial that in, suddenly things start to really flow really smoothly.
And Eric said, thank you both. I'll be practicing all of these things more. I appreciate both of your wisdom so much. This is really clicking for me. I'm so glad.
Awesome.
Yeah. And same thing with me. Same thing. This was years and years. I don't know, maybe this was like 14 years ago or so, something like that. I lost someone very close to me. And it was quite tragic, and I was really depressed, like wouldn't get out of bed. And I remember one day I was like, all right, I got to get out of bed and do something. So I drove up to the beach at Lake Erie, and I was just looking out at the water, feeling so much sadness and heaviness and depression, and through that depression, I was just taking in the beauty of the lake, and which looks like an ocean if you've never seen Lake Erie. It looks very much like an ocean. So so drinking that beauty in and everything, and then out of that depression and sadness and heaviness, I started singing in a language that I didn't understand, and I didn't know if I was making it up or what was happening. It sounded like an actual language, but I couldn't understand it. But it was really beautiful, and I was singing. It sounded so beautiful, and at the time, all I knew was that made me feel better. And that it felt really beautiful to me. And so for years, I never shared that with anyone. But if I was ever feeling that really kind of heavy, depressed state, I would just start singing like that. And it would make me feel better. And that's all I knew, is I did it for me because it felt good for me. I never shared it with anyone. And then 10 years down the road, I was doing a reading exchange with someone that I found online. Like they did a reading for me. I did a reading for them. And I was like, hey, I want to share something with you I've never shared with anyone before. And so I did that singing, and they're like, oh, your light language is so beautiful. And I'm like, my what? And they're like, yeah, that's light language. And so she explained a little bit about it. And then so of course I had to go look it up after that. And apparently it's something that all of these other people have discovered as well. But I had no idea it was a thing. I didn't know it existed. Never heard of that term before. But the way they described it is it's energetic information that comes in that you translate into sound vibration using your voice, and then that information can be picked up by other people. So once I learned about that, then I remember I had been seeing this one client regularly I was just guiding him on shamanic journeys. Every once in a while we would do a healing session, and I had a healing session with him, and I was like, hey, I want to try something new at the end of the session. Just be open to it. Just kind of drink in the sound. I'm going to sing a little bit. You want to understand what I'm saying, just kind of be receptive. And so I sang what I now knew was light language, and I sang that. And after the session, he was like, Casey, you've been doing these healing sessions for me for like 2 years, and that little bit of singing was the most powerful energy I've ever felt during any of these healings. And I was like, really? I had no idea, And so now I use it all the time. But it came through a beautiful altered state that came about because of deep grief, depression, and sadness.
Yeah.
And I can still sometimes, to me, feeling really down or heavy sometimes feels really good, and I can really enter into a very present, conscious state of being in that kind of low sedated state. So I can totally relate with you there.
Yeah, and people don't talk about that, in our spiritual circles and stuff, because that doesn't follow the mainstream narrative. Mm-hmm. But there are all kinds of ways into altered states of consciousness, and you're really finding your unique way to do it, and like you went into a completely ecstatic moment, that's what I would call what you were doing with the light language and everything. You went into ecstaticism, which is a state that is a high trance state and may even be related to the rare gamma brainwave state.
Yeah. Gamma is like powerful spiritual experiences, and it's those, and then also seizures, if I remember correctly.
yeah, it's a fine line.
Right. That's so funny. All right. Well, hey, we're about an hour in, so you want to wrap up for the day?
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, awesome. This was so beautiful, Zane. Thank you. It feels really good to be open and share about all this stuff, because I know, like, when I go on like Reddit and I look, sometimes I'll type in, like, because last night I think I was at 96 hours into my cold turkey, so I could type into the search bar 96 hours cold turkey, and there's all these people saying, like, oh, like, today was really tough but I feel better now, and just reading stuff like that like really helped. And so if this helps anyone to either make the decision, or like if someone's already going through this and they're like, hey, you're not alone, to help people realize that they can do this, that it is possible. And if it helps even a single person, then that's so worth it, and so.
Absolutely, man. And I want to once again tell you how thankful I am for for the ability to be vulnerable that you show, because you're really helping people, and it's through that vulnerability, because other people would try to be tough or macho or downplay certain aspects of it, or even upplay certain things to unrealistic proportions, and that doesn't help anyone. But what you did in this little hour here of just wearing your heart on your sleeve, telling the people the truth, what you experience, that's the stuff that really helps other people get through things.
Thank you, brother. I love you so much. And Harris says a Nike Koyaki.
A Nike Koyaki paniche.
A Nike Koyaki to all of you. I love you all so much. Thank you. And we'll see you again next week, most likely. Love you all.
Bye-bye.